All right. Hey, everyone. Matt Netko with Ionic here. We are really excited to get started with our webinar today. Ionic Native, native-powered apps without the hassle.
Now let's, here, can we hover a little bit? All right, we got people rolling in. Let's give them like 30 seconds. But yeah, I suppose we can take care of the housekeeping items and then get going.
Exactly.
Sounds good.
So thanks again, everyone, for joining. Our webinar is being recorded today. Our presentation is going to be just under an hour with plenty of time for live Q&A at the end. So please submit your questions to us in the live chat window on the side, and we'll get to those at the end.
Yeah, so there's like a Q&A button. You can ask questions throughout the whole presentation. So like if you have questions, you can ask them now if you would like.
Exactly.
But we're going to answer them live at the end. So
That's
we'll go through that and we'll make sure we take care of the whole Q&A.
And of course, everyone on the webinar today will receive a link to the on-demand recording later today or tomorrow. So thank you, and let's get started. We've got an action-packed agenda, but first, really quick, I am Matt Netko, head of DevRel from the Ionic team, and joining me,
we've got Kramer.
That's right.
Director of Product Management here at Ionic.
Yes. So 2 Matts, 1 webinar. Let's do it. We've got a lot to cover today, action-packed agenda. First, for those that are maybe not as much aware of what Ionic is, who we are, all that, we're going to give a brief overview. We're going to be covering a lot about native development challenges, and of course, introducing Ionic Native, revamped solutions and pre-built solutions and plugins today, and go into common use cases, everything that we solve with that. Really excited to cover that. And I'll have a live demo implementing encrypted image storage, tying a couple of those solutions together. And of course, we'll have a recap and again, time for that live Q&A at the end.
So yes, some of you might have already attended some of our previous webinars that went over kind of each of these individual solutions. So things like just Identity Vault, I know we had a webinar on. This presentation is going to go over more how to combine a lot of the different stuff we have and use it together. So we're really excited to show you how to do that stuff.
Awesome. Let's get to it. Okay, so briefly, we are most known for Ionic Framework. If you've probably heard of us, you probably know about our mobile-ready UI library that's built on the open web and works everywhere and anywhere you want to be. Any platform, any device with any JavaScript framework. So the idea here is you're able to use your web development skills and build iOS, Android, Electron, PWAs, web apps, on and on and on, with just one code base that runs on all platforms. You're using your basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript web skills to build these apps, and there's no compromise. You still get full access to all the native APIs and device hardware that you'd like or ever want to access. You may hear us occasionally or have heard the term the hybrid architecture approach. This is kind of the approach that Ionic takes and the Ionic framework takes, where again, you're using your core main web skills to build applications that are still essentially native apps at the end of the day. What we do and kind of how the technology works briefly is we run your app within a browser web view, which is basically an embedded browser within a native app shell. So our little image kind of summarizes that really nicely. Takes your web code for you, bundles it into a native app, and for your end users, it's all the same. It's just a native app at the end of the day. There's a couple of native runtimes and the technology behind this that powers this, Cordova, and most recently, Ionic's Capacitor project. And again, this is what powers that deployment process, that bundling and deployment to app stores, desktop with Electron, and of course, progressive web apps, right?
So yeah, most of what we're going to be talking today, if you look at that picture on the right, you know, like Neko said, you've got your JavaScript, your HTML, your CSS, that's the code you're writing, running in that green web view right under it. And that native wrapper is the part that allows you to have access to native functionality. So you can go call the camera or do different things in native land, even though you're primarily working in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So that native wrapper, that kind of middle layer, that's, for the most part, the functionality that we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. All right. So when you look at app development, whether it's the hybrid app approach we just talked about or regular native app development, it is unfortunately the most challenging piece of the puzzle. And so let's look at why that is. Well, when you look at building any type of mobile app, especially, whether the web or native iOS, Android, there's a typical feature checklist that are basically table stakes these days that your users expect, the business expects, all of that. And these are essential and required if you're going to deliver a really great application experience, especially when you're talking and thinking about going cross-platform. And some of those things are offline access. So of course, even as cell networks and Wi-Fi improves across the world, there's always situations where your users and yourself are going to find yourself offline. So how do you manage that data? How do you sync that data when you come back online? We have single sign-on. So of course, this is being able to use your user credentials, your employee credentials, just the same ones to sign into different apps, whether it's social media or your internal company systems.
I want to talk about single sign-on for just a minute too, just because that's a rather unique one when we look at this checklist. So things like offline, like maybe you handle it a little bit in the same way sometimes. I mean, there's native options for offline as well. But when you look at something like single sign-on is something as a traditional web developer, like myself, when I do single sign-on in a web app, like you're booting up another browser window, you're doing your single sign-on in that browser window, and then you send a token back and you keep going. Things like that workflow, where you might put together your checklist and say, yeah, single sign-on, it's easy, I've been doing it before. That workflow does not work at all when you're working in a kind of a hybrid ecosystem. You have to utilize special native browsers built specifically for authentication, because it's a little complicated, we'll talk about it later. But effectively, those things on your checklist sometimes work differently in native land. And we're going to talk about how we solve some of those specific use cases for you.
Yep. And leading and very much related to that, you have biometric authentication. So that's your Face ID, Touch ID, fingerprint identification, all those features that are unlocked and really powerful and that are really mobile specific, device specific. So of course that can be tied to a login experience with single sign-on, or as we'll see, protecting encrypting data, things like that. So there's lots of great use cases there, regardless of what your company or app needs to do. And of course, you have, as Matt said, the core device features. So Bluetooth, geolocation, camera access, any of those standard device features that we've had for years and years now, right? And typically, you're going to want to use at least one or two of those to provide a great app experience. And last, every app is different, but inevitably you're going to have some third-party integrations. So that could be social media like Facebook or Twitter. That might be payments. So think of Apple Pay or all that, those kind of NFC kind of payment options that we have now. And of course, your cloud providers like Firebase, Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, all those things. So there's a lot. Basically, there's a lot to think about. And regardless of what type of app you're building, you're going to hit at least a few of these bullet points here. So what ends up really, let's take a look at what ends up happening when we try to implement those features in our apps. We've got a number of challenges, right? The first one is the native skill gap. So as web developers, by design, by choosing the hybrid approach, we don't necessarily want to invest time to learn iOS and Android and other, depending on other desktop, for example. We don't want to invest the time to learn all those native programming languages that can, require a lot of capital, a lot of time investment, whether you're, an indie developer or on a large team.
Well, and some of them are like really, really different. So like, I'm a classically trained Java engineer that also got into web development and abandoned Java a while ago. But like, I look at Objective-C personally and like, I can't even read it. So like just the syntax of learning all of those different languages to kind of pull off the same thing in both Android, and then you have to do it in iOS and do it all across all these platforms. It gets to be a headache.
Exactly. And it's not just a go learn the programming language and voila, you're proficient in it. There's the SDKs that they provide, the native IDEs and tooling that you have to learn and understand, all those WYSIWYG and GUI tools, and building great cross-platform experiences. User experience matters, especially on mobile, and that you can't just pick that up in a day, right? And there's a lot of aspects to think about and challenges that we see teams running into. And then when you look at, well, maybe I can hire for this or I can outsource it. Well, based on recent surveys from Stack Overflow, only 6.5% of developers worldwide know native technologies. So that's going to be really challenging to find that talent, right? Because of that, the native skill gap and those talent type of challenges, what ends up happening is teams, of course, naturally turn to free open source community plugins. I mean, that absolutely makes sense, right? You're web developers and there's this large community of thousands of open source plugins. Why not? They when you start searching for something, a particular solution, you find something, it seems really great. But there's unfortunately, there's a hidden price to free, right? It's more than meets the eye especially when you're starting a new project like this. There's research time and effort to find and implement the plugin that you're looking for and what you think might work. And of course, what happens when you run into issues? Again, you don't have that skill to debug them, figure out what's going wrong. And because of this being community driven, you've got unreliable release timelines. There's no one you can really call up to say, hey, I need help. Like if you've picked a solution that your app really is relying on, is one of the main features or really the whole purpose of the app, you're going to be in trouble, right? And then you have to think about as well security when it comes to patches and upgrades, keeping up with mobile operating system updates, especially on iOS and Android every few months, and of course no SLAs that you can really tap into when you need to.
So a common example, if we look at this, is like, let's say you find a Cordova plugin. It works really good for you for a while, right? And then you find out after you've spent all this time implementing the feature set that does work, there's part of it that is broken, right? And let's say you're lucky and somebody has a GitHub issue on that plugin open already that says, hey, if you go into the native code, you edit these 2 lines of Objective-C, that's going to fix the issue that you have. So you go in, you edit the 2 lines of Objective-C, just put it on exactly the line numbers that they told you to put it on, hit save, recompile the plugin, and like now you're good, right? But like now you're off the release cycle entirely of that plugin. So you're in this situation now where it's up to you to continually try to upgrade that plugin and keep that fix in if it's not making it into the original plugin. So more often than not, what happens is you don't do that. And so now you're stuck on a version of that plugin from, whenever you made that edit, and you're not getting new releases of that plugin for those security fixes or for those patches because stuff just isn't making it into the release cycle that you might care about.
Yeah. So you might it's kind of like a Band-Aid approach, right? You might be able to hack it in for this particular upcoming, 2-week sprint and release it and get it out there.
And now you're stuck.
But exactly. Yeah. Long term, not so great. So the last, really evolution of this that we see is because, okay, you've had issues with finding native talent, issues with community plugins that are supposedly free. And last, what we see teams do is, well, of course, the natural last part of this is maybe I should build it myself. Maybe I have to. Maybe that's really the only option. But of course, the challenge here is this can slow down your development time by weeks or months. And of course, as we know, time is money. So that has real impact on your project, your company, et cetera. And not to mention, it introduces risk to the project because whether you're bringing other talent in to help with that, think about, again, those long-term maintenance costs. You might be able to throw in a Band-Aid again, as we talked about, but all in all, the other main thing here is that you're spending less time on what matters, which is your company's particular innovation, your core business. So why reinvent the wheel? Why get bogged down with all these things? So
so I mean, if you're building critical apps in this situation, like we just talked about all these kind of problems with the native ecosystem, like if you're building critical apps, what do you do? Like, where do you go next? So with that, we're here today to talk about Ionic Native. So this is an entire suite of native functionality that's backed by us without the hassle of trying to figure out like which plugin should I use? Is this plugin being kept up to date? Who can I talk to if this plugin does have an issue? So we've curated these plugins. We've built custom solutions that you can use that we strongly believe have really, really good APIs that you can implement extremely quickly. And Neko will show you some of that a little bit later in the live demo. But really, we support the platforms that you care about, and we have security at heart the entire time. So like whenever we program these solutions, we might talk about a specific example soon here about like the security that we build in as opposed to like hobbling together other open source plugins.
Mm-hmm.
So this comes with a couple different varieties. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off.
Mm-hmm.
So first and foremost, we have the Premier plugins. So these are those essential features that Neko was talking about earlier, right? These are the basics, the things that most apps are going to use at least probably 3 or 4 of these in any given application. So you've got things like the camera plugin, which we're going to show off in our demo today, all the way through like in-app browser or accessing the contents or contacts, working with the file system, geolocation, like all these really common stuff. So we support those out of the box so that you can use our installed versions of these plugins, and we're on the hook for fixing them and making sure that they work for you. So this is kind of the simple stuff. But even more exciting than that, in my opinion, is all of our kind of solution space, as we call it, right? This suite of functionality that we've built specifically, A, to be secure, and B, to work with each other. It's a family of products here that work really well and kind of share a lot of the same stories. So before we dive into those stories and how you might use these three things, let's go over each one individually and just talk about its merits real quick. So Identity Vault, like I said, we've already done a full webinar on Identity Vault if you want to check that out. That's kind of the mobile biometrics side of the equation at a simple level. But it also is doing the secure token storage for you. It's managing sessions. It's doing data at rest encryptions. It's doing inactivity timeouts. It's hiding the screen when you go in the background, like all of this cool security related features. Now, when you move that over to Auth Connect is effectively single sign-on built from the ground up by our team to utilize the security best practices from all the different platforms and do SSO the right way. So you give us your SSO, effectively a configuration for like Auth0, Cognito, or Active Directory, anything OpenID Connect. We use that configuration and handle everything for you. So for instance, iOS has a browser who's like a special native component that is an authentication browser built specifically for this. So we use that instead of in-app browser like some of the other solutions you might find in the open source land. Moving on, offline storage, that's your encrypted local data. So you can get access to like encrypted SQLite with full query support. You can store files in the thing. You get advanced querying capabilities built right in for anything that you want to do kind of offline to store that data. So now those three things obviously kind of share a lot. They work really well together when it comes to telling different stories. So I wanted to dive in and just show you how some of these things work together in tandem to perform functionality that you probably care about for your current project.
Let's check it out.
Yeah. So first common use case, we've already mentioned single sign-on a ton of different times. So when it comes to single sign-on, you're going to want to combine Auth Connect with Identity Vault, which gives you an out-of-the-box flow that you don't really have to worry about, right? Like I said, you set up a config object that's literally like this big, and everything just kind of starts to work. So you kick off that single sign-on login flow utilizing Auth Connect, but then you're going to use Identity Vault to store the access token that you get back, right? That's that token that you're going to send to your server to go modify or request data. Then maybe you want some additional stuff from Identity Vault. So you want, if the user hasn't done anything in 15 minutes, let's boot them out, lock the token down, right? Or put the screen in the background, hide everything, right? Lock them out automatically maybe. Then when they come back and they want to continue the use of their session, they want to go back to the server, they want to get more information, you're going to require biometrics or PIN unlock or at-rest encryption to get that token back, continue using it. Maybe you're going to refresh it with your auth provider and then continuing to access your data. So it really brings together both solutions in one spot. So on to the next one. This one's a little bit simpler here, right? This is like simple data mode. This is if you want the secure storage functionality of just key value, right? You want to store encrypted data at rest or put it behind biometrics or PIN support, you can use Identity Vault. Now, there was a secure storage plugin that existed in Cordova that was sunset over the summer. This achieves that functionality of a simple key value store. So you put your sensitive information inside of the secure storage in Identity Vault. You lock it in any way that you see fit, right? You can manually lock it. You can lock it after the 15 minutes. And then you're going to yet again require the biometrics or PIN unlock to retrieve that information. And if you just want to use at-rest encryption too and not use biometrics or PIN unlock, similar to how the secure storage plugin worked, you can do that as well. So either way is an option to you.
Yep. And this is a core component of the demo I'm about to do too. So yeah, with a lot of, storing this data. When we say at rest, I mean, this is in Apple's keychain and iOS's equivalent for, on device at rest encryption, not local storage where anyone can read it. Like this is as secure as it gets, especially on mobile. So.
iOS has like an 80-page document on how to use all of this information together, right? So for instance, you have biometrics and you want to store information behind biometrics. If you go combine like 3 different plugins to pull that off, the best security you're getting is a JavaScript if statement. Because you're saying like, if biometrics is true, then go get the data and display it on the screen. So literally that if statement is protecting you. Identity Vault keeps everything in one plugin, one place. All the native APIs are talking to each other directly in exactly the way iOS or Android expects you to do that. So,
and really, as we'll see in my demo, for me as an implementer, it was one line of code to leverage this. And I just felt so grateful. I'm like, Matt, you can go read that 80-page document. The native team could read that.
Yeah, right.
and I'll just get back to building my apps, right?
And we'll read it again when it comes out again next year.
Exactly, that's a key part, and you will keep on top of that, and I can just keep happily building apps on the side.
Exactly. So let's say you want to take it to like the next level, right? You need more than key value. You want like actual encrypted offline data in a queryable database that you control. So that's going to combine Identity Vault and offline storage. So when it comes to encrypting local data, like let's say that SQLite database on the actual phone installed in your application, like there's a real database running there that you can query. When you go to encrypt that, you need something to encrypt and decrypt it. So you're going to generate an encryption token that's like the key to unlock the data and decrypt it. Now, the thing is, if you encrypt a whole database and then you have that encryption token and you just like throw it in local storage, well, that encrypted token is now available to anyone and they can just go decrypt your database. So theoretically, you've accomplished pretty much no security because that's just sitting there in the open. So Identity Vault allows you to take that encryption token and store it in Identity Vault, yet again, possibly behind biometrics or PIN support or at rest. So it's in an encrypted place. So effectively, we encrypt the database, but we have our encryption token also encrypted in the actual physical device. So you go forth, you store data in your files in the local encrypted database, you access that data through all the querying and stuff that you're used to, and then you lock that token away in the vault when you're done with it. Now, this solution is actually built on top of SQLite, the whole encryption piece. So if you're already using SQLite today, you're going to be able to just take this, throw it in, and get the benefit of the encryption and storing that right in Identity Vault. So use both to get kind of the best level of security you possibly can. So both the encryption token is secure and all of your data is secure.
Very, very nice, Matt. All right. So we've been talking a lot about these solutions. Let's actually see some of this in action. Let's dig into some code and a real use case, okay? And so what I'm going to show off today is combining a bunch of our solutions, Identity Vault and offline storage and our camera Premiere plugin to build an encrypted image storage app in really just a handful of lines of code. So let me escape out of here and switch over to Ionic Studio. Mac, what can you tell us about Ionic Studio while I'm pulling this up?
Yeah, so Ionic Studio is our new environment that allows Ionic developers to really quickly and rapidly build out applications utilizing Ionic 4 and Angular, the newest version of our framework here. So you've got the ability to like visually do all of your pages, kind of drag components onto the screen. We're launching like 50 new drag and drop patterns that you can use. You can do all of your custom componentry, like everything's at your fingertips, so you can go in there and really without reading any Ionic documentation, like you're able to go in and build an Ionic app and everything is just at your fingertips. So I use it personally on one of my apps that I'm building and I love it. So not really what the demo is about today, so I'll get off my studio high horse and let Nico show you the native stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. All right, everyone. So what are we talking about here? So when we think about, use cases, industries, who would want to build encrypted image storage? When we really think about that, there's all types of things. What I'm channeling here in this case would be a travel agency, really anyone that needs to scan like a driver's license or an ID. There's lots of situations where we need to be able to read your address, your name, your social security perhaps, and of course that's really critical, very important personal information. So we need to make sure if we're building apps that leverages that, not only to protect ourselves and our teams, our companies, but our users' data is increasingly, especially in this age, more and more important.
Yeah, and if you're
not be undersold, right?
Yeah, and if you're in an industry like healthcare, like that is a legal requirement. Like you are required
legally on the hook to get it right.
Get it right and to encrypt that data in a way that people don't have access to it.
Yep. So, what I've got here on the left, and what I have is my iPhone connected to the screen here, connected up to Studio here in our little demo app, is showing off a quick example of, what would happen if we needed to scan, maybe going through a travel queue, need to scan our driver's license, maybe like think of TSA in the US, things like that. And what I'm going to do is show off kind of scanning that a driver's license. Matt wanted me to asked if I would use my own, and unfortunately I would not, because that would not be as secure.
He was not willing to share his real driver's license.
So I created a fake one, and we'll kind of walk through that. So already you see on the left-hand side, I've got my travel ID app here. asking you to scan your ID to get started. So that's going to read that image data and store that, encrypt it, not only the picture, but your information as well. So you'll notice here, I've already got the app open, and already a bunch of things have happened behind the scenes seamlessly to the user, really hidden to the end user. And let's kind of briefly look at what that is. So I've got an image service class here in my Angular app that kind of wraps all of a little bit of Identity Vault, but specifically our offline storage solution that again provides that encrypted database powered by Couchbase Lite. And what we're able to do here is when the app opens, I'm initializing that Couchbase database, and the key part of the encryption is right here. So what it requires is an encryption key. So some sort of GUID that it'll use to encrypt that data and store it at rest. And so you'll see here, I'm actually calling out to a different service, following development best practices here, kind of separating concerns as much as possible. And saying, okay, we'll go, when I set that encryption key that'll be used for the lifetime of this app, let's go retrieve that from somewhere. And that somewhere is Identity Vault. And so there's a lot of what's really great is identity. I mentioned not long ago that from one or two lines of code, I'm able to use that secure storage feature for this express purpose. So you can think about, there's a lot of ways that you might generate this GUID on a per user basis. So you'll see for the sake of simplicity here, I'm not logging into the app, but you could imagine that you'd retrieve this encryption key from a server, one of your web APIs. After the user, me, him, whoever has logged in, it'll be unique for us and already generated from some other fashion, right?
Yeah, I don't want to share my token with you.
No, it's same ditto. So what I've done here, though, for simplicity and still could be cryptographically secure, is using the built-in crypto API to generate a random GUID on the fly for this app user. And then we'll, of course, store that GUID and reuse it every time that you log into the app. So that's not as important as and powerful as what we can see with Identity Vault, which is when I call the encryption key method, I'm retrieving it from secure storage. And if I don't have it, I'm creating that random GUID, of course, live and then storing that. So really just a couple lines of code to implement that logic, and it's going to be secured at rest in Apple Keychain and Android as well.
Yeah. So now just to back up, this random GUID here, like what we're accomplishing with this, if we go back to the image service, is we're giving that to the database to use as its encryption key. So what we were talking about earlier, where like you've got the thing that has the ability to decrypt your whole database, that's the thing we just generated and put in Identity Vault.
Yep. Very nice. Yep. So with that, our database is instantiated. We're ready to go. So let's take a look and actually scan my ID, as it were, and look at this. So if we look to the left here on my iPhone, I'm going to tap the Scan ID button. And here is my Victor's Wisconsin driver's license.
This is a really good fake, I've got to say.
I know, it's just I printed it on the best quality paper available.
You didn't even cut it.
Nope. So, just really simple example here. We've got, you see address, the name. I would not want my information out in any old app, right? We want to be able to secure this. So I'm going to say use photo. And what happens here is you see automatically I'm displaying the image on the screen because maybe you need to show it to your security agent or you're passing through security somewhere. And I've also, have parsed all the information off the image. So to be clear, this is somewhat faked in this example because we're more concerned about storing this image. It's kind of outside the scope here to actually, parse that image and render it and all that stuff. But the gist of it is here, right? We're able to display that using the camera plugin, quickly take a photo, and if we had multiple, if we're an agent, scanning through a lot of these, we could move quickly and move on, right? But let's look at what's actually happening after that camera, that photo has been captured, right? So we're back in our image service, and the really interesting part here is okay, so we're using the offline storage service to store that image. So really quick, straightforward. If you've worked with any of the Cordova or Capacitor APIs before, you know how simple it is to just configure some settings for capturing an image and this opens the device camera. And then what we do is we take that image, all those bits and bytes and all that data, and store it into offline storage. So what's really great about this, you'll notice there's nothing specific about encryption here and whatnot, but we're able to load this data into a new document and then call database.save, and automatically that's encrypted at rest. If we close the app, if we go navigate away, none of that data is going to be compromised.
Yeah, effectively your encryption is configured once at that database initialization level, and then you don't have to worry about it throughout the rest of your application. Like when you're programming a specific feature, like you're just doing gets and sets and queries on the database, and everything is happening automatically from an encryption standpoint. Even down to that, like I mentioned earlier, like a 15-minute timeout that locks everything. Like
we're gonna look at that too. Yeah, that's cool. A good reminder. So yeah, and then of course when we come back to the app later, like I'm just displaying this immediately over here. But with just a few lines of code, we can query and retrieve it out of the database. And again, without myself as a developer having to know the guts and internals of how that works, we know that it's secure. And if I hadn't provided that right down here, the correct encryption key, or had wired that up, I would be blocked, even as a developer, of course, from retrieving that from my device. So we'd see all kinds of errors and run into issues there. A quick note on the identity vault side of things, which I really, really love, is I'll go back to my device here. If I, talk about like an additional layer of protection. So you've got your other options like single sign-on, Face ID, all those kind of things. But we have as well, if we put this into the app background, you'll notice, I'll do that again. I'll come back and forth a little bit. So I'm going to put that in the app background. You see how I've got Google up on the side. That's still, rendering whatever latest news. The settings as well, that actually is blanked out. But this one as well is all blocked. So, this is a classic use case of, and really it's just this main configuration here, hide screen on background. So anytime it goes in the background, or again, as to Matt's point, you can lock after 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you want. I'm safe from, someone looking over my shoulder, or any kind of situation where, again, this is incredibly sensitive data. When I go back to the app, there you go, it's loaded. Yeah, so I didn't have to do any custom development for that. That's provided out of the box.
Yeah, it's literally just a line of config. And right where we've seen this adopted the most is actually banks, right? Like if you have a banking application on your phone, you probably already know that your banking application does this, right? You don't want, for instance, like somebody just scrolling through your list of apps or something like that, like in your bank balance is there. So a lot of banks utilize that hide screen feature as well.
Yep, perfect. All right. So at a high level, we've got an encrypted image storage solution built with just a handful of lines of code and a couple awesome Ionic Native solutions. Let's head back over here. How about a little recap, Mr. Matt?
Yeah, so I wanted to recap, kind of like we did for the stories a little bit ago, like what went into play here, what did what. So we combined Identity Vault, offline storage, and our Premier Camera plugin specifically. Now, like we could have also thrown in the entire authentication piece and a few other things, but like we wanted to keep it simple. So we used these three for the example. So first we generated that encryption token. That was the code where we saw like you could do that on the server, you could do it locally. We personally used the Windows crypto API. And then we stored that. We gave it to Identity Vault and say, you keep this thing secure for us. We're going to come back and ask for it later, but you handle that. We then took a picture using our camera plugin with that easy config object you might have seen as well. Just said, hey, here's our settings for the picture. We then took that and stored it in the local database with a simple .set, right? So we just said, hey, take it. We don't really care how the encryption works at that point. It's just going to happen. Then we showed off, you minimize the screen, we hit everything, right? Maybe we lock the vault after that 15 minutes, we encrypt everything, we put it back at rest, we hide it behind biometrics, anything like that, preventing access to the data, even if someone gets their physical hands on the device. So we require that to be unlocked. After that's unlocked via whatever means, we now have access to that encryption token again. We can go back to the database and call it .get, and we'll actually get the image. And retrieve data and continue using everything. So really it's kind of like the circle, right? Like, do I have access to the token? No, let me go get it. Let me unlock the identity vault, get the, through biometrics, get that, use it to decrypt the database. Now I've got that full query support, even with the files, like you showed with storing an image.
Awesome. All right. Last point we wanted to mention in the challenges that come up with native app development specifically is, of course, the ever-changing technology landscape, whether you think about web or mobile technologies. I threw in a little joke here about by the time I finish the sentence, another JavaScript framework will have been created. And that's just one portion of this two-part, these two parts here. Since I mentioned that on the website, you have to think about the maintenance over time of software, because regardless of whatever approach, tools, technology, Ionic or otherwise, software over time does require maintenance, right? That's I don't know what the stat is, but probably 90% of all software development is maintenance and keeping up with bugs, new features, all those things. So on the website, you've got new browsers coming out, always evergreen features and changes and releases that come out regularly, sometimes daily, weekly, what have you. You've got thousands of devices and tablets. Because we're big lovers of the web, it's incredibly accessible by design, right? But that also means a flood of different types of tablets, phones, what have you, that can access it.
Well, and everyone expects this level of security, no matter what device they're on. It's not like, Joe's on Android, he doesn't care about security. It's like, no, this is, like you talked about earlier, an expectation that our users have, is to have this quality of life.
Yeah, well, to meet them where they're at, as you move from maybe a work tablet or a laptop at work to something at home, like a desktop computer or an iPad or something. Yeah, you want to be able to keep up with that. But that pace of innovation, when you think about JavaScript framework churn and tooling to keep up with, it can be exhausting, right? And that's just keeping your app really just ongoing with these kind of features, not to mention delivering new value.
Yeah.
On the mobile side, that can also be really tricky. You have new iOS, Android operating system updates, sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly, but that can often that really introduces risk, because as your users update, if you haven't been able to keep on top of those things, you might not know what you're going to be hit with, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, Face ID was new when it dropped, right? Like now we've got a new way to do biometrics that we weren't expecting.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about here is the software side of things. You also have new hardware designs. These are far less frequent, but we still are really seeing some interesting new innovation on the hardware side. Most notably, we've got foldable smartphones that are coming out pretty soon, if not already have started to drop.
Motorola Razr is coming back.
That's right. So, that's a big one. And, not just maybe like 2-3 years ago, we had the iPhone notch come out, wrecking havoc with web apps, native apps, everyone, really. That was not a hybrid app concern. That would have crossed everyone. So what do you do to kind of stay up on top of this, and really distractions that take you away from innovating and building your core app features, right? Tell me more about that, man.
So that boils down to like how support and maintenance is actually performed. So we have our support team that backs all of these native solutions that we just talked about. And that does a lot of different things. But first and foremost, what it allows us to do is control the release cycle.
Yep.
So now that's has two different ways of being good, actually. So first and foremost, that means if there's like a big fix we need to get in, we have the ability to get that fix in. No one else is controlling the release cycles except us. So if we need to merge, some fix in that's not available publicly, like we have the ability to do that and get you a new version. The opposite is also true. So if there's a breaking change somewhere that gets released, we can prevent you from getting that breaking change. So it goes both directions. And that's most important when it comes to like actual security updates, right? So you'll be able to talk to our support team about what's going on throughout that process with the actual SLA. And then obviously, guidance expertise, how do we set this stuff up, right? How do you get, for instance, your SSO flow working with the configuration, right? You need some help. We're around to help you out with that.
Just really quick on the regular release cycle front, I was floored to learn, and going back to your single sign-on example of iOS specifically, how it has, native solutions and ways to authenticate users and all that. I was floored to learn not long ago that, in fact, across the last, I think, 2 or 3 iOS releases, they changed how the recommendation for those native controls to use. Now, I can't keep up with that.
I mean, they've launched a brand new auth, like literally.
I mean,
you're not kidding.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, if we want to dive into that, like they've launched a new authenticated browser like 3 or 4 times at this point. So at that point as well, like now it's like, okay, if someone has an older iPhone, I need to use the slightly older version of the authenticated browser, but I also need to support the new one, because like you don't care if they're on version A or version B of an iOS device. Like, you want to support it regardless. So support for multiple authenticated browser experiences built in right into that.
Well, and those are those nuances that will absolutely kill your development speed, right? You'll have, the reality is not everyone's going to be on the latest and greatest iPhone, and this is keeping with this example. So even if you try to limit it to like, okay, the last phone release cycle, or, you know, devices from 2016 and on, like over time, that's a perfect example of needing to keep up with that industry knowledge and the news somehow, some way. Or you could let us do that, you know, and make sure that our software can dynamically switch between the right, you know,
authenticated browser.
Exactly, right. Without having to worry about it, right? We can detect that and move on, and life is good. All right. So in summary, thank you for joining us. Ionic Native. It's our native backed by Ionic way of delivering a hassle-free solution, right? Everything that your team needs to build amazing cross-platform experiences from day one, without frustration, without hassle. So of course, as Matt and I have said, we've got a curated library of plugins and solutions that we dove into today. You're going to be able to implement these in minutes or hours and not weeks or months, not distract you from delivering that core value to your user base and your business bottom line. And of course, all of these work on the platforms you care about: web, iOS, Android, and beyond. And you can rest assured knowing with peace of mind that you've got built-in security, performance, and stability. So go ahead and check it out. It's available at ionicframework.com/ionic-native for more information. And with that, I am Matt Netko.
I'm Matt Kramer.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's switch on over to our live Q&A. But in the meantime, again, if you have any questions about Ionic Native that go beyond this, or interested in learning more, please reach out to sales@ionicframework.com. We'll get you the hook up there.
Definitely. Yeah. Let's do some Q&A.
All right. We got some good questions here.
Oh, all right. So you're going to need to exit the presentation mode.
I think so.
And we'll
a little window.
The
oh, there it is. Okay.
We can just drag it down to the bottom.
Sure.
Then you can go back in presentation. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So if you have any questions and answers, remember, so we are in Zoom this time around. Zoom sometimes makes it a little difficult to like find the buttons because it's trying to show you the screen instead. So if you are looking for like a little bar somewhere, it's a black bar. If you want to like hover at the top and the bottom of your screen, if you can't see it, there is going to be a Q&A button. If you hit that, you can ask us any questions and answers. We will answer them live. For a few more minutes here, we'll probably do just a couple minutes of Q&A.
Yeah.
If there's anything we don't get to as well, feel free to reach out to that sales@ionicframework.com. They'll be able to hook you up with a resource who does know the answers as well as us.
Cool. So great first question from Dan.
I like the so RSA Secure ID, a little bit technical of a question for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely reach out and sales will be able to get you hooked up with one of our engineers from the project who probably knows that a little bit more in depth than I personally would, at least.
Yeah, when you're thinking about, I would say if it ends up generating, if we're talking about Identity Vault and generating encryption keys, it today takes a general encryption GUID type of scenario.
I mean, it can take anything. It's just taking a string.
Exactly.
So like as long as you get us a string,
exactly,
we can use it.
We can use it. That's for sure.
You can generate your own. We can help you do that. Like either way, it's going to work.
Yep. But of course, that's a perfect example of there's lots of third-party vendors that can provide that functionality, and you can plug and play with it. Exactly.
Now, Josh had a good question, and I know you immediately said that it was answered, but I do want to dive into it. So Josh asked, will Identity Vault and offline storage work for progressive web apps? So when it comes to these things, like we degrade to what's available on the device. So automatically. So when you talk about like Identity Vault, right, you treat security in one way when you're on a physical hardware device, right? We are going to put things in iOS's secure enclave, right? If we don't have access to that because we're running in a literal browser or doing a progressive web app, we will default to what we think is the most secure next best thing. So we start to backtrack all the way to those browser standards that we've used for decades when it comes to like browser storage from the standpoint of like sandboxing and stuff like that. Like we'll default all the way down to that. So we start with like, hey, are we on the latest and greatest iOS with the latest and greatest authenticated browser, and then like or authenticated storage, and then like move down the way from that. So A couple
Yep,
questions about
great one.
recordings. Recordings definitely available. I think after this ends, it just wants us to
Yes.
take a look at it, and then we
We
publish it within like a day or so. So you'll get that in your email.
Yep, we're generally pretty fast. Send out an email, usually same or next day, with all the recording. I wanted to mention too, the demo app is open source, just kind of show off the examples. We'll have a full guide up in the documentation pretty soon. So all those links we'll send in that email as well as a link to this recording. So absolutely.
Couple questions about Studio. I can take care of some of those. So Studio, if you want to learn more too, like reach out. We can give you a demo, the whole 9 yards. Ionic Native and this set of plugins we've just talked about is supported by Ionic Studio. So if you want to go use Identity Vault inside of Studio, in fact, I mean, Neko was using it, both Identity Vault and offline storage inside of Studio.
Yep.
Totally possible. If you want to learn more about that, feel free to reach out as well. Let's see here.
Oh, this is an interesting clarification one. So do we prefer to use Ionic Native over regular Ionic apps, or, go base it off of application requirements? So just to clarify that a little bit. So this Ionic Native is really a complementary solution that sits alongside your Ionic app, right? So you're going to be building your Ionic app that's based on web technologies, that runs in a browser and can be deployed to iOS, Android, and wherever you want. And these native solutions work in tandem with that. So there's not really an either or. You don't just pick Ionic Native.
It's an extra module, effectively.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an add-on that you can use depending on your use cases, right? That's why we have a variety of them, because we wanted to cover so many different, industry standards and angles, right? So really good question. Thank you.
So next up, somebody asked, when was 1.0 released and what's the usage on existing production apps? So that question has like a lot of layers, right? In some capacity, like 1.0 of a lot of these different plugins have been out for years, and their adoption is like pretty much every single Ionic app utilizes some part of these native plugins. Now, when it comes to like the super cool solutions we talked about, like Identity Vault or stuff like that, those have all been 1.0 for a while now, and we have lots of our customers. I think pretty much every single one of our like enterprise customers is utilizing at least one of the options available when it comes to the native.
It's a mix and match play, right? Depending on what their needs are.
Exactly. I mean, we talked about how you can combine them for various use cases as well. So overall, we're thrilled with the adoption, and it's been great.
Yeah. So yeah, essentially there's no general 1.0 because there's so many different solutions, but they've been available for months to years depending on what the solution is. The most recent release would be offline storage, that the core driver of my demo today, that provided that database and encryption offline storage kind of situation.
For sure.
Yeah.
Question from Michael.
Oh yeah, shout out to Michael. Thanks for joining us as always. So really good question about using the slides to help us explain these solutions and things. Absolutely, that's something we'll include in that email that goes out later. A link to the slides. We use SlideShare, I believe, to host them. So feel free to mix and match and reuse those as you need.
Yeah, and if you want to share those around, or like have us come and talk about like a set of slides even specifically for you, talking to other people in your company, like let us know. We're always willing to help.
Part of our, just keeping that open source mantra going of, giving as much as we can. Absolutely. Shout out to Todd. Thank you very much. Glad you're here. Let's see.
Yeah, and a couple different clarifications here. So if you go to that ionicframework.com/ionic-native, you'll see documentation on that page for like the different open source offerings, the different paid offerings, what's available in enterprise, what's not, the different solutions, and their corresponding documentation. So that's going to be getting kind of a revamp that reclarifies everything. So like the Ionic Native that you've installed and played with before, like still has that documentation up and running. This is more like the ones that we actually use and support. The Ionic Native you most likely already have installed is not supported, maintained, written by us, none of that. Like that's purely community open source plugins. What we've talked about today is all stuff that like we as Ionic are on the hook for.
Right.
That's our stuff.
And really just solutions that are built for teams and enterprises, things like those kind of use cases. Yeah. Yep. So, yep, we do have a bunch of community plugins and other things that are still available. Nothing has changed with that. Those will always be free and available. But yes, as Matt said, that's kind of the situation there. So I think
we're about at time.
Yeah.
So if you had any remaining questions that we didn't get to, feel free to reach out to that sales@ionicframework.com. But I mean, with that, thanks for joining us. I'm Matt.
I'm Matt.
And we'll catch you guys next time.
Until next time.
See you later.